Deep in the ancient forests of England, where the trees grew twisted and the sunlight barely touched the ground, there was an oak so old it looked dead, but wasn't. That tree was her home. Black Annis was not a woman, not anymore. Her skin was the color of bruised midnight, stretched tight over a skeletal body. Her face was long and hollow, with eyes like empty caves, and her claws, long, iron-hard fingers, could peel bark from trees like paper. She slept inside the hollow oak by day. At night, she hunted. Villagers said she could smell children from miles away, especially the disobedient ones, especially those who stayed out after dark. When the sun fell, parents locked their doors and pulled their children close. Because if Black Annis found you, she didn't kill you quickly. She crept through the forest without sound. No snapping twigs, no footsteps, only the faint scrape of claws against bark. Children walking alone sometimes felt at first a pressure in the air, a sense that the forest was holding its breath. Then came the whisper, not words, just a wet, rattling sound, like someone breathing right behind you. If a child turned around, they would see her crouched between the trees, her body bent unnaturally, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. And then, she ran. Those who were taken were never found whole. People said Black Annis skinned her victims and wore their hides like cloaks, draping them over her shoulders as she sat in her tree, rocking slowly in the dark. Some nights, villagers claimed they could hear crying from the forest. But it wasn't a child. It was Black Annis, mimicking their voices to lure others out. One winter night, a boy named Thomas didn't come home. Search parties went into the forest at dawn. They found his footprints leading toward the hollow oak. They stopped there, because the prints didn't end. They rose, straight up the trunk of the tree. Claw marks were carved deep into the wood. No one ever entered that part. Years passed, but the forest never forgot. Trees near the hollow oak began to die in a perfect circle, their bark stripped away as if something had been feeding on them. Animals refused to enter that part of the woods. Even birds avoided flying overhead. The villagers pretended Black Annis was only a story, until children started going missing again. Not taken from the forest, taken from their homes. Doors were found open in the morning, windows unlatched from the inside. Small muddy handprints appeared on bedroom floors, too long, too thin to belong to any child. One night, a widow named Margaret heard scratching at her door. Slow, careful. She pressed her ear against the wood and heard her son's voice whisper, "Mother, let me in. I'm cold." Her son had been buried 2 weeks earlier. Margaret didn't open the door. At dawn, claw marks were carved deep into the oak door, as if something had grown angry. The village priest claimed Black Annis could not enter a home unless invited. So families began hanging iron charms above their doors and nailing horse skulls to trees at the forest's edge. For a time it worked. Then the whispers changed. People began dreaming of her. In the dreams, Black Annis sat at the foot of their beds, peeling strips of skin from her arms like old cloth. She never attacked. She only watched. And when they woke, they found dirt under their fingernails, as if they had been digging during the night. One man followed his dreams into the forest. They found him days later hanging from the hollow oak, his skin carefully removed and draped over the branches like wet laundry. The tree was no longer hollow. It was full. The villagers gathered with fire, determined to burn the forest down. As flames rose, a scream echoed through the woods. High, furious, inhuman. Black Annis emerged from the smoke. She wore faces, children's faces. She ran not from the fire, but toward the village. Only one child survived that night, a girl who hid. No one ever learned the girl's name. She grew up in silence, never speaking of what she saw that night. But the village noticed strange things about her. She refused to sleep near windows. She never went near trees. And sometimes, late at night, She whispered back to voices no one else could hear. Years later, she left the village and married, believing distance could save her. It didn't. On the night her first child was born, the midwife heard scratching beneath the floorboards. Slow, familiar. The girl, now a woman, began to scream. "She's here," she whispered. She followed me. The scratching stopped. Then came the smell of damp earth and rot. The child was born silent. Not dead, just watching. As the years passed, the woman noticed her child never cried in the night, never feared the dark, never blinked when alone in a room. And sometimes, the child would stand inches from the bedroom door, whispering softly, "Mother, let me in," even when the child was already inside. When the woman finally returned to the old forest, the hollow oak was gone. In its place stood dozens of trees, each one carved with faces, each one breathing. She understood then. Black Annis no longer needed a single tree. She had rooted herself into the land, into bloodlines, into children who survived. That night, the woman dug beneath the largest tree until her hands bled. She uncovered bones, small ones, wrapped in skin that still felt warm. Behind her, branches creaked. A voice leaned close to her ear and whispered, "You invited me." At sunrise, the forest was quiet. The woman was never seen again. But travelers still report something strange in old forests. Trees that lean closer when children pass, roots shaped like fingers, and whispers that sound loving, patient, hungry. Because Black Annis does not chase anymore. She waits. She watches families grow. And when a door opens just a little too wide, she comes home. No one knew whose home it was anymore. The village had changed names, borders had shifted, but the houses were still built from the same old wood. Trees taken from the forest that should never have been touched. That night, when she came home, no doors were broken. They opened on their own. A man woke to the sound of breathing beside his bed. Warm, patient, loving. He felt a hand on his chest. "Don't be afraid," a voice whispered in his wife's tone. "I'm home." But his wife was asleep next to him. When he turned his head, the face inches from his own was wrong. Too still, too stretched, smiling without blinking. By morning, the man was gone. Only his face remained, neatly placed on the pillow, as if someone had taken it off carefully and tried it on first. After that, people stopped locking doors. It didn't matter. Children began drawing pictures of a tall woman with long arms and many faces hanging from her body like clothes. When asked who it was, they all answered the same way. That's who lives with us now. At night, families heard movement in their homes. Slow crawling sounds inside the walls, above the ceilings, beneath the floors. Not searching, settling in. One mother woke to find muddy footprints leading from her front door to her child's bed and back again. The child was still there, smiling, older, watching her like something that had learned patience. The priest tried to bless the homes. The words caught in his throat when he saw her standing in the doorway behind him, wearing his mother's face. She leaned close and whispered, "You built this house from my bones." By winter, the village no longer spoke. Lights stayed off. Windows were boarded. People moved through their homes quietly, afraid of reminding her they were there. But she didn't need reminders. She knew every family, every bloodline, because home wasn't a place anymore. It was wherever someone remembered her, and as long as children slept under roofs made from.